As Guyana sits on the economic and political crossroads, we speak to the nation's opinion leaders and decision makers to get their views on the challenges the country faces and the path it must take to achieve national development. Welcome to Nation Watch. Now here is your host Mervyn Williams, former member of the Guyana Parliament.
It's Sunday, 19th May 2024, is it? Right? 2024. I'm eagerly anticipating 2025 regional and general elections, and therefore I sometimes lose track. So it's 19th May 2024. It's Sunday, and you're tuned to Nation Watch. Thank you very much for joining us from wherever you're joining us. Today, we're going to be discussing the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy, the new developments, recent developments. But just before we get there, permit me to, on behalf of the leader, executive, and members of the People's National Congress Reform, extend sincere condolences to the wife and other family members, relatives, and friends of former General Secretary of the People's National Congress Reform, Mr. Oscar Clark. Mr. Clark died on Wednesday, 16th, just before 4 p.m. We were all very, very shocked at the news. There were a few of us gathered in a room having a conversation when the information came. And we immediately left what we were doing and headed down to Mr. Clark's home and to the hospital to meet with his wife. Mr. Clark served as ambassador, minister, city councillor, and I believe he was the longest serving General Secretary of the People's National Congress Reform. With me today in studio, my guest, Mr. Ronald Austin, former ambassador himself. Mr. Ronald Austin, CCH. You have worked with Mr. Oscar Clark for several years. I'm sure if anyone can claim to know him very well, you certainly can.
Thanks for the invitation to be here this morning. I can't claim to know Oscar better than anybody else, but I've known him for a very long time. Not only as a politician, but as a person, as a friend. Oscar used to, at the time he was an employee of the telecommunications agency, I think on Breakdown. That's where he came from into politics. He used to visit my home when I was a very young boy. In the Silver Street in the 60s. And over the years, I've got to know him very well. I've always liked Oscar for the simple reason that he doesn't get flustered by anything. I mean, if you told Oscar tomorrow is Judgment Day, he'd probably say, well, bring it on, He had a very good temperament. And about as remarkable and something I really admired in him is his loyalty to the People's National Congress. His loyalty to the cause of the People's National Congress, and his belief in the purpose, direction, and philosophy of this party. You can't fault him in that regard. He took over the General Secretaryship, I remember, in around 1998 or thereabouts, at the time when the party was really being traumatized by various events. I mean, some of them you know about. I don't need to enumerate those events, but Oscar brought stability to the work of the party. He put the party back on an even keel, and he shepherded the party through that very difficult period with great astuteness, and one has to congratulate him for that. The other remarkable thing about Oscar Clark is he had an encyclopedic memory of the history of the People's National Congress.
People and places.
Yeah, if you wanted to know anything about anybody who would serve the PNC in various capacities, or if you were looking for a document, Oscar Clark was the man to ask. And I do hope that the leadership of the People's National Congress is going to take advantage or try to have access to the trove of documents that I know Oscar has, and to make it part of the available data to the party. I regret the passing of Oscar Clark because it happened so suddenly. Because I don't think it was 4 or 5 days before I sat in Kim's office talking to him for over an hour, and he regaled me with the complete history of the People's National Congress, as usual, and what he thought, what were his views on where the party was going. And as he spoke, he revealed a lot of important data and information about the PNC. So there's going to be a gap in the knowledge of the party. There's going to be a gap in the humanity of the party. It's extremely, I've never heard Oscar lose his temper with anybody, regardless of what the situation was. You can always go and sit with him, and he would quietly but skillfully lead you out of conflict into resolution and peace. All I can say is he's been a remarkable member of the People's National Congress. He's an example to any rising leader of the PNC, and I hope his legacy is honored and respected by the party.
Yes, indeed. When Mr. Hoyt brought me back into the system as another member, it was Oscar Clark, who together with Robert Corbin, at the time chairman of the party, who sat with me and had that important conversation.
Yeah.
And we had several other conversations, and I learned a lot about his tenure in Zambia. And from what he told me, I pieced together the fact that the indigenous Guyanese community and the African community, in large measure, share similar traditions and traditional beliefs. Sitting at his feet would make anyone an accomplished politician, an accomplished human being. It's regrettable that he had to go. We will move on with our program now. Ms. Austin, we had a number of conversations here on Nation Watch, at least 8 of them, dealing with this issue of Guyana and Venezuela and what you defined as the existential threat to Guyana's sovereignty and territorial integrity. You, in the very first conversation we had here, spoke to the need for a sustained national education program aimed at providing information to every Guyanese citizen so that everyone is on the same page with respect to the history of this matter and Guyana's perspective on this matter. There's been no move in that direction except a few bumper stickers that Essequibo is viewing. And there's been no information coming from the executive, from the government of Guyana to the people of Guyana, keeping us up to date, up to scratch with the developments in this situation. How important is it for us to really, really get this program of education, public education going? And how much of a disadvantage do we face as a nation with no information at all coming from government?
I do remember our previous conversations where I think we both focused on the need for a sustained public education program. And I remember either I said it or if I didn't say it then, I'm saying it now. It's not only existential, or maybe because it's existential, it's not going to go away. And I remember in my very last days at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I had a very one opportunity to meet the new Minister of Foreign Affairs. And I told him that when I joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the big issue was the border controversy. And as I was leaving the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 2020, it was also the big question. And if you have an issue as important and in a sense as dangerous and as significant as the border controversy, you have to keep your population informed so that they can make informed decisions about any policy you might put out there about the border controversy. I think regrettably, and I think somewhat troublingly, that after we started, after this initial phase of Venezuelan aggression, there were a few programs, there are a few, as you say, bumper stickers and so on, but that has faded away. I think as we speak here this morning, I don't know of any major government-determined public policy program about the border controversy, which is going on right now. And not only, which is for me a major concern, not only for the urban population, but for the people, as you mentioned in the previous program, people in the areas adjoining the border with Venezuela. Now, while we seem to have gone quiet on the border controversy, on the other side, our Western neighbor has been very aggressive, very active. Any Guyanese can tell you, anybody who's involved in public life will tell you that almost every day you get an article, a program, something coming out of Venezuela on the border controversy, which supports the Venezuelan side or gives you an analysis of what is going on, and not by people you can ignore. Sadio Garavini, who was here as an ambassador, a very young ambassador, I think he was in his 20s when he was here, writes frequently for a newspaper in Caracas, and he gives his version of events. It might be, he might on occasion attempt to be a bit objective, but he comes down on the side of his own country. And an area that I find very worrisome, where again it does not compete at all, is a number of PhD theses which are being, I suppose, written at the instigation of the Venezuelan government. The last one that I saw, which is over 938 pages, was written by a man called Rafael Madrid. And that not only takes on entire border controversy, but it makes an attempt to put paid to our case as it is at the ICJ and as set out in the Venezuelan County Memorial. In short, Venezuela has been very active on the information side, while it appears to me that we are slackening our efforts on the Guyana side. And I do not think that is the best position for the nation at the present time. But because as we go along, you'll see where Venezuela's aggression is not diminishing, but increasing.
Which brings me to this whole question of the referendum. Venezuela has named Essequibo as one of its states.
Mm.
It has given a name to Guyana's Essequibo region as Guayana Essequiba.
Mm.
It has set up a governance structure. A general has been placed in charge. A general has been appointed governor. Among the responsibilities given to this governor and his team is the authority to revoke existing contracts in our territory, Essequibo, and to receive, consider, and approve project proposals in Essequibo, particularly as it relates to oil and gas. Venezuela, in the referendum, made some critical points and have acted on every single one of those points.
Yes.
The government of Guyana, on the other hand, had a meeting with the leader of the opposition and is yet to implement a number of the issues that it discussed and agreed upon.
Yeah.
Venezuela has been moving steadily ahead.
Yeah.
The actions taken by Venezuela are not, well, the ones I just identified. do not come with military aggression,
Mm.
but they come with the blessings of the parliament of the Bolivarian Republic
Right,
of
yeah.
Venezuela, making them potent.
Mm.
What does this mean for Guyana? There's a parallel with the Ukrainian situation and Russia.
Mm.
This seems to be mirroring that approach. What does this really mean for us as a nation?
It's funny you should mention the connection or the relationship between the border controversy in Ukraine, because a former governor, sorry, president of, I think it's Colombia, has made the same connection and has warned Maduro not to attempt to do what Putin has done in Ukraine. Now, to go directly to your question, I'll be very honest with you, and as I said, and forgive me for repeating it, I've been with this question for a very long time. And I've never seen a situation as challenging and as dangerous as the current situation. I'll tell you why. The referendum has triggered a number of activities, programs, and policies by the Maduro administration, which shows that they have a structural design to take over the Essequibo. In the past, whether it was Carlos Andres Perez or Campins or Lucinchi or Caldera, all of those presidents seem to have stopped at the water's edge, that they would lay claim to the Essequibo rhetorically, but not to move beyond that. There is a structure in place now to take over the Essequibo. That is go through the referendum. The last issue where they say they're going to create something called a Guyana Essequibo. Now, subsequent to that, as you know, Maduro made the announcement. He's defined the Guyana Essequibo, the geographical contours of the Guyana Essequibo. It has a headquarters in Bolivar province, Tomaremo. And further on, it was announced in the Venezuelan Gazette that members of this Guyana Essequibo can sit in the Venezuelan parliament. They can benefit from programs of the Venezuelan government. And generally, you have what seems to be a parallel state structure for the Guyana Essequibo. Now, we have made, and other organizations, the CARICOM, the Commonwealth, and OAS, made a number of statements saying that they protest what is going on. But the fact of the matter is that the Guyana Essequibo is in existence.
As far as Venezuela is concerned.
So I may sound like a bit of a madman, but if you look at what happened a lot during the Second World War, where when there is some controversy about whether government existed or not, not only the Western countries but the Soviet Union at the time created parallel institutions, and as time went on, depending on who was exercising power, they threw their weight behind that institution that they wanted to succeed or to flourish. Now, what happens if this Guyana Essequibo exists beyond for another 10 years, for example? And then one day some crazy man in Latin America gets up and says, you know what, we recognize Guyana Essequibo. As a great French politician, diplomat said, Paul Cambon, there are no small things in diplomacy. Every little thing that you see happen, you have to pay attention to it.
Let's talk about a little thing. One additional little star on the Venezuelan flag. The Venezuelan parliament approved the addition of that one flag, that one star to the Venezuelan flag. And Venezuela has officially objected in a number of instances to countries flying the flag of Venezuela minus that single star.
Yeah.
And that has erupted in some cases in diplomatic notes being exchanged and diplomats being called in and all of that.
Yeah.
That little thing, how important is it? And what's happening in Guyana? Which flag is being flown in Guyana for the Venezuelans? Is it the one with the additional star, the one minus the additional star? And what are the diplomatic implications for Guyana and its partners or allies?
Well, that is what I was saying, how important this is to Maduro, and we can go on to discuss why it is he's pushing the Ghanaian Essequibo matter with such energy. That matter, the question of the star on the flag, is causing a lot of problems, and I have not seen it discussed here publicly in Guyana. I don't know what flag is being flown in Thomas Street where the embassy is. I don't know what flag is being flown at embassies in Caracas. I do not know. But for Venezuela, it is such an important matter that when the British flew a flag without that extra star, the Charge d'Affaires was summoned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and upbraided for not recognizing. But obviously, it's Ghanaian people. Now you're in an unprecedented phase in this border controversy. We've never been here before.
I mean, you can't tell a country what design to put on their flag and what significance those designs should represent. And in this particular case, we know that it represents Venezuela's idea of that additional state, like Guyana, Essequibo, which is our territory.
Yeah.
And to ask our former colonial bosses, for want of a better expression, who led the charge to establish the boundaries as they now are, to accept this additional star as a representative of Venezuela's claim to our territory. It's heavy diplomatic stuff. I mean,
as a citizen of this country, I'm anxious to know what it is my government is doing or has done about that particular matter. Because while it is not in the newspapers, it's not on the television programs and so on, when you speak to people who are involved with diplomacy, this is a matter that is causing a lot of agitation, a lot of serious concern, both in Caracas and here in Georgetown. And could I say further, it's not just the star. That same law, that organic law that was passed by Mr. Maduro's parliament, it says that if you as a Venezuelan citizen refuse to take the Venezuelan position on the border controversy, you can find yourself in a lot of trouble. And you can't even do it as a member of the opposition parties.
Interesting. But what has Guyana done? Guyana has taken its case to the UN Security Council. Guyana has taken its case to the Commonwealth Group of Nations. Guyana has taken its case to the Caribbean community. And we know what's happening in the Caribbean community as far as the Venezuelan Petro-Caribbean deal is concerned. And we understand that not all leaders of CARICOM are on the same page in terms of their open support for Guyana and condemnation for Venezuela.
Yeah.
But what these moves mean is that Guyana has only been talking.
Yes.
On the other hand, Venezuela is building up its troops alongside Guyana's borders. Guyana has, and you see the evidence, as Venezuela has constructed a bridge connecting
Bolivar
province to Ankoko Island, and to the western part of Ankoko Island. And we know that in 1966, Venezuela invaded and still unto this day occupy the eastern half,
part,
which is Guyana's territory.
Yes.
So that, Venezuela now occupies the entire Ankoko Island. And we know from the pictures that we've seen and which we'll share with you now, that Venezuela has taken military hardware to Ankoko Island.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, as fate will have it, the elements stepped in. Global warming and its effects blew the bridge away.
Divine intervention.
Divine intervention, yes, took the bridge apart. But that doesn't mean that a bridge wasn't constructed and cannot be reconstructed. And it doesn't mean that hardware is not on Ankoko. We know it's there.
Yeah.
What has Guyana done to mitigate? Have we built up troops? Has there been a call for persons to enlist in the Guyana Defense Force? Have we acquired defense equipment? Have we launched out diplomatically as we ought to in reasonable circumstances to win friends on our side, as was done in the case of Burnham and Hoyt back in the early days of independence?
Well, I'll surprise you. I have some sympathy for the government because this is a situation that I don't think anybody anticipated, or I don't think anybody has worked out exactly what should be done. I'm not saying that the government could not have done more. But the fact of the matter is that I think you've seen the last article, which appeared in the Sabbath News, which was based on the CSIS report, that they've moved troops. Those troops are armed.
Heavily armed.
Heavily armed troops, a lot of equipment, and so on. The question that we should ask ourselves is precisely what can we do? We don't have Venezuela's military capacity to respond to it. What we can do is mobilize international opinion and support to turn back that aggression. And it can be done. But it's going to take a sustained diplomatic and other effort to get Venezuela to change its mind. Venezuela has to be incentivized to stop the aggression. And as a state, and as I've indicated to you, this is a threat to the very existence of Guyana. We should not stop at anything to get Venezuela to stop its aggression. We cannot allow this aggression to continue. You don't know where it is going to lead. Mr. Maduro is clearly using the border controversy to mobilize support internally so that he can win the elections in July. And as a consequence, he's riding the tiger of the border controversy. And the fact of the matter is, I think he's reaching a point where he cannot dismount.
He cannot. Clearly, he cannot dismount. And his successors will be hard-pressed as well in the circumstances, because you rile up an entire nation. You have not managed their expectations.
There is no Venezuelan politician alive, president or minister, who can get up and say, I
renounce this.
I renounce the controversy, or I'm going to remove the troops from Ankoko. But we have to, it can be done. It can be done. But it's going to take hard diplomatic work. It's going to take a lot of lobbying. It's going to take the mobilization of resources, diplomatic and possibly military resources to get something done about this aggression. It is very worrisome. Every time you open an article or open the pages of any major newspaper or look at any TV program, the border controversy now is on CNN, it's on Al Jazeera, it's everywhere.
It takes guts too, apart from effort.
Yeah.
I'm looking at a document here that speaks to Mr. Burnham's visit to Venezuela, April 2nd to 3rd, 1991. 1981, I beg your pardon. April 2nd to 3rd, 1981. And here's what Mr. Burnham actually visited Venezuela. I think
he was invited by Campaigns.
Campaigns was the president.
Just before the protocol of Port of Spain was scheduled to run out.
Right. And here's what Mr. Burnham says in his report at page 23. In the light of the position which the recent Venezuelan statement appears to have taken, it will be convenient for me to restate, as I did recently in Venezuela to the president and at a press conference, that our government's position is as follows. A, the 1899 arbitral award is entirely valid. Even if the award was invalid, the boundary laid down pursuant to the award has acquired full validity as a result of Venezuelan recognition, acquiescence, and other conduct relating thereto. here Mr. Burnham is laying out Guyana's position. Even if both the award and the boundary laid down pursuant thereto are invalid, the land claimed by Venezuela does not automatically go to her. In such a situation, whatever settlement procedures adopted, account will have to be taken of all of the claims of both sides, including, in particular, and this is very interesting, Mr. Granger also alluded to this. One, claims by Guyana to the Amacura, Barima, and Cayuni areas, which we lost to Venezuela as a result of the award. So Guyana lost territory in the Amacura area, the Barima, and the Cayuni. And so Mr. Burnham is saying clearly here that if everything is disregarded, we go back to our claim.
Yes.
And he says further that claims by Guyana based upon our possession and occupation right up to the comparatively recent time when Venezuela first formally rejected the validity of the 1899 award. And it goes on. So this calls for some guts.
Yes.
Not the kind that you jiggle on a stage at a Congress, but political gusto to confront this issue and to deal with it frontally.
And to face the reality of what you're facing, you can't have a state building up troops on your border and you casually either disregard it.
Or say that you have spoken with your allies.
Yes, or not pay attention to the implications of what is likely to happen. Don't forget geopolitically, Venezuela, I've never thought that Venezuela will invade the entire Essequibo. They'll take a piece of land that is big enough to satisfy its domestic constituents and small enough not to cause the international community to come down on its back. And if the international community does object, Venezuela is likely to get support from Russia, from China, Nicaragua, and, as I suspect, quite a few Latin American. I'm not saying this to frighten anyone. I'm saying this to say that Guyana has its work cut out. You say guts. I say a realistic appraisal of where we are with the referendum, the creation of Guyana Essequibo, and the buildup of troops on the border. Those are highly problematic questions that deserve to be treated frontally, honestly, and
openly.
And openly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to bring to the attention of our viewers this map. This is in the circled area. We can pull it up just a little bit. Is the Ankoko Island. On the eastern side, which is to the left of screen, is the Venezuelan half. There's a line there, a broken line. And the other part is Guyana's territory, which is occupied by Venezuela. The Ankoko Island sits in the Cayuni River.
Yes.
And it is between the Cayuni and the Waiamu River, I believe it is.
The junction of the Cayuni and the Venamu.
Venamu River.
But that is our river.
It is our river.
Yeah.
Now, I want to show our viewers the map of the final settlement of the border between Guyana and Venezuela. It's a 404-mile long border. And given the territory, it's not going to be easy to have troops all along the line. But Venezuela is strategically using Ankoko as a stepping stone. And to move closer. So the red line on the left of screen there is the finally settled border between Guyana and Venezuela. This settlement was in 1899. And this was accepted by all parties and even appeared on stamps and other official documents coming out from Venezuela until they decided in 1966 to change their view on the matter. But that's 1962. So this was a result of a survey which I think started in 1902 and ended in 1905.
04.
The drawing was in 1904.
Well, they surveyed in 1904, and then they find the final maps were in 1907.
Right. So this is where we are. I think my reading tells me '05, but you would be more conversant with
No,
it. So,
05 is that's when I think they started the demarcation. But well, put it this way: when the Venezuelan government finally signed on to the maps was 1907.
yeah, that's where the settlement was
Yeah.
occasioned.
But could I say something about Ankoko?
Before you get there, I'm seeing here that the descriptively delineated by the Paris Award in 1899. It was surveyed from 1902 to 1905 by the mixed British and Venezuelan boundary commissions,
Yeah.
which observed and monumented a series of 25 geographical positions along it. So that's where I got my bit of information in the 1902.
No, it's quite. The survey was done in that period, but I'm talking about the formal recognition of the maps by the
In
government
07.
of 1907. But I want to say about the Ankoko, and it's essential that every Guyanese schoolboy, trade unionist, budding politician, contestant for leadership or whatever in Ghana must understand. The Geneva Agreement was signed in 1966 and created a mixed commission. And the mixed commission was supposed to deal with Article 1 of the Geneva Agreement. That is, a controversy has arisen because of Venezuela's contention that the 1899 award is null and void. The commission starts to meet in 1966. Has its first meeting, I think, in Caracas or here in Georgia. I'm not sure exactly. Members of that commission were Rashleigh Jackson's uncle, Sir Donald Jackson, Dr. Shahabedin, Shirley Field Ridley. First meeting. Then the second meeting. It's while the second meeting of the mixed commission was proceeding that Venezuela invaded Ankoko. And further, I want to say, and I sound like some old school master trying to teach my nation a lesson in history, but all of the major infractions, breaching of treaties, disregard for international norms, occurred during the life of that mixed commission. And Coco, don't forget the Rupununi Rebellion 1969, the 68th Leone Decree. And then there was a big problem in a place called, I think it's Cabo Caburi with the Venezuelan Indians, where they were caught doing some kind of funny stuff there. Now, I mentioned this because this is what you're up against. Not only the movement of troops and the buildup of troops, but negotiating with Venezuela is a headache. If you look, you mentioned just the question of nullity. They say the war is null and void. We say, okay, prove it. They've never done so, but because they cannot do so. But yet, in their recent Constitution Memorial, they found a way of getting around the question of nullity by saying that we never said we wanted to prove the nullity of 1899. We don't have to.
But I want to fast forward to where we are now. We outlined Venezuela's referendum, its approval by the parliament, and the government's actions following parliamentary approval. All that they did, we identified the steps that the government of Guyana took. We recognize that the government of Guyana is not informing the nation on what happens, except, look, we took this thing to the Security Council, we took this thing to Commonwealth, we took this thing to CARICOM, and so on. We identified the fact that Venezuela is updating its people.
Yes.
And that happens daily. Now, we recently had in the Caribbean region, the United States military engaging in activities that are, in some instances, normal, routine. In the case of Guyana and Barbados, we had aircraft flyovers, which we have some footage of. In Guyana, we had two fighter jets flying over Georgetown and its environs. U.S. fighter jets. Unprecedented.
Mhm.
In Barbados, there were two Apache helicopters, militarily equipped helicopters flying over. Venezuela, for its part, sees this as aggression,
Mhm.
particularly the Guyana flyover, which we're looking at the moment. Guyana has not spoken of Venezuela's aggression, at least not that I can recall. Venezuela has been extremely aggressive in its troop buildup, its military hardware stacking. And we recall that in or around 2008, 2010, Venezuela actually bombed two pontoons
Yes,
within Guyana's
in the
territory.
Cuyuni, yes. Yeah.
And there was nothing done. The PPP was also in government at the time. But Venezuela is seeing this military operation by the United States in the Caribbean. It's not limited to Guyana
Mhm.
as aggression and a violation of the Argyle Agreement. And Venezuela is taking its case to friendly countries. What is Guyana doing? And in the same response, could you tell us, please, what are the implications for us in Guyana and the implications for the controversy between the two countries of this kind of action? Of course, it could not have happened without the permission and approval of the Guyana government.
You know, after the invasion of Ankoko, the government publication. Are we okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Warned. It seems as with the award of 1899, so with the agreement of 1966. Venezuela arrogates the right to itself to accept and honor so much of the compact as she chooses and to reject and disregard others which are inconvenient to her.
Conditional acceptance.
Yes. They never stick to an agreement. After 1899, there was no, while there were a number of individuals who criticized the 1899 award, there was never any formal government rejection of 1899 until 1962.
Mr. Austin, the government of Guyana has not responded
To the aggression.
to the aggression. It has not responded either to Venezuela's position that these flyovers were acts of aggression. And Mr. Maduro labeled our president, Guyana's president, as a puppet of the United States. The government of Guyana has not rebuked Mr. Maduro for those statements, as far as I can recall.
No, they haven't.
In fact, the only CARICOM leader who has spoken to this matter is Mia Motley. And even what she says raises additional questions. We'll show you a clip of Ms. Motley's press conference, and she's speaking specifically about the helicopter flyovers,
Yes.
the Apache flyovers within Barbados airspace. And we'll go to that clip.
Had this exercise been held, there would have been no risk or concern about Guyana and Venezuela. A year ago, had this exercise been held, there would have been no immediate apparent risk and concern about our other member state, Haiti. It just shows you what can happen in the blink of an eye. We stand on the precipice of great and grave danger if it is not handled appropriately.
Apparent risk to our region. We're in great danger if it is not handled appropriately. This is the Caribbean Prime Minister who refrained from condemning Venezuela for its aggression towards Guyana,
Yeah.
and who called on Guyana
Yeah.
and Venezuela not to escalate matters and cause the region to move away from being a zone of peace. When the world knows that Guyana lacks the capacity to be aggressive towards Venezuela. How do you categorize Mia Mottley's comments?
As I told you informally, that when I listened to what she said, I really couldn't understand that. Whether the flyover taking place a year ago or currently, for me, it doesn't really matter because Guyana, as we said at the beginning of this program, is fighting for its life. Whether Guyanese politicians or the government wants to recognize it, this is an existential crisis. And don't forget, we're not only fighting Venezuela, we have our neighbors to the east who always become active
Whenever
Venezuela acts up. So, D.H. Lawrence once said that we live in a tragic age and we don't take it tragically. Well, we are living in as far as the border controversy, tragic times, but I don't think we're taking it tragically. So I don't know quite what Ms. Motley was saying. And as you said, she skipped over the fact that the Venezuelan troops are on the border. What is right in saying is that we are on the cusp of major changes in the region. If we are not careful, and you said just now, and I'm not, God forbid, I'm not preaching. You said just now, I agree with you. When Maduro said that our president is a puppet of the United States, it should have been a very robust response from the government. That should have been rejected out of hand. And the other thing that is equally troubling is this. I heard Maduro himself saying that there are 20 American bases somewhere in Guyana. You can't allow that impression to form in Latin America. An American base anywhere in this region is going to turn this region upside down. We, by now, I should have thought the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Office of the President should have been out there rebutting this kind of nonsense. And the fact that the entire administration, according to the Venezuelans, are not puppets of ExxonMobil and American interests. Whatever the government of Ghana is doing to save this country from disaster, that is one matter. They cannot have in the public domain these kinds of allegations which go unanswered, in my judgment.
Which leads me, we have about 6 or 7 minutes remaining, which leads me to the hard question. Venezuela is still being petted by the United States,
yes,
obviously because of its geopolitical importance and its oil reserves. We can't fool ourselves about that. Venezuela is indebted to China.
Heavily.
Russia established an arms manufacturing base in Venezuela some time ago. They make AK-47s and all sorts of things in Venezuela. So China and Russia both have interests in Venezuela. Russia supplied them with fighting jets and other arms and ammunition.
Good point, yeah.
And they owe China a debt, in the economic sense.
$60 billion, I think.
No. Guyana becomes the basis for conflict. Is Venezuela being used by other external forces as a bait to involve the Americans, even as the Americans attempt to embrace Venezuela for strategic purposes? And is Guyana destined to be a victim of a very, very serious battle, geopolitical battle between and among the powers?
I congratulate you for mentioning that because when the jets flew over, quite a few of my friends said that we've got protection and so on. People tend to forget that before the emergence of Chavez, Venezuela had a very pro-American foreign policy. with a few exceptions under Perez when they tried to go leftwards by supporting the third world and so on. But Chavez is the one who made a radical break and who embraced both China and
Russia.
and Russia. You're right in the sense Chavez knows that if he baits the Americans by intruding into our affairs and to building up troops and so on, he is very comfortable with a scenario in which the Americans go after him and he brings in the Chinese and the Russians. That must be a fact in his head. And if that should happen, I pray God that Ghana knows exactly what it has to do.
Well, it's interesting for me from another point of view as well. Mr. Ali and Mr. Jagdeo have said on a number of occasions that they're relating to, they're briefing, they're bringing up to date their allies. I don't know if it's their allies or allies of Guyana on the developments. In the meantime, everyone sees the United States as an ally. The flyover is instructive. Now, let's say Venezuela has democratic elections and an alternative government is formed, and that government has a U.S. inclined foreign policy, but still pursues its claim against Guyana's territory. Where does that put us?
A very difficult position, and it is possible that the opposition parties in Venezuela seem to be pro-American or pro-West. You remember in 1840 when Palmerston was asked in the British Parliament about if Britain has permanent friends and permanent allies, and he said, we have no permanent friends, we have no permanent enemies, our interests are eternal. Big states have interests. We should not translate or mistake interests for an alliance.
Which is evidently what has already happened. There seems to have been a major mistake made in the minds of the executive of this country, that they can just have a Congress, dance up and have fun, do not discuss these critical issues because of allies have got our back. Which allies? But that's the question. And one of our identified allies, obviously in the interest of peace and security, has demonstrated a continued willingness to ensure that they bring Venezuela into a certain position with a certain alliance, perhaps with a conversion of foreign policy.
As far as I know, quickly, the United States said it supports 1899. It says it wants a peaceful resolution of the border controversy. It has interests in Guyana which it ought to defend. But I have not heard the American government or any department of the American government say that they're opposed to Venezuela in geopolitical terms.
Precisely.
In my own view, if America has half a chance to get Venezuela back into its column, it is going to do so.
And the question lingers, ladies and gentlemen, where will Guyana be in such a situation? Who will our allies be? Who will we rely on? Should we not take our own deliberate steps and actions to defend our territorial integrity, to protect our national sovereignty? Should we not ensure that we do what is right on the diplomatic front and take other measures, other requisite measures to protect ourselves? That's all the time we have today on Nation Watch. I want to thank Mr. Austin very, very much for coming and bringing with him to Nation Watch and sharing with us all his knowledge acquired over several decades in the Foreign Service, in service to the people of this country. Thank you very much, Mr. Austin, for your time.
Thank you for offering me the opportunity to talk to my fellow citizens.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining and staying with us for the duration of Nation Watch for today, 19th May 2024. We'll be back again next week when we will be speaking with Dr. Vincent Adams on the issue of oil and gas and Guyana's economy. Until then, God bless.
Or if I may say, sorry.